Lex Fridman dropped his interview with Donald Trump, and we have a lot to go through from this. I'll get to what makes it just such a complete and total nightmare to me, but let's start off with something a little bit more lighthearted. I won't specify who. It definitely wasn't anyone around this office, okay? But some people out there, or in here or somewhere, was saying that Trump, in certain parts of this interview, looks quote unquote baked. I couldn't speak to that. I don't know. Or high as a kite. It's totally inappropriate, the speculation. But he looks funky, we'll say, for sure. Something in his face looks strange. So you'll take note of that. But first, again, on the more interesting questions that were asked, because a lot of it was way too much of a softball interview. Epstein was asked about. Take a look at this.
There's a moment where you had some hesitation about Epstein, releasing some of the documents on Epstein. Why the hesitation?
I don't think I'm not involved. I never went to his island, fortunately. But a lot of people did.
Why do you think so many smart, powerful people allowed him to get so close?
He was a good salesman. He was, was a hale and hearty type of guy. He had some nice assets that he'd throw around, like islands. But a lot of big people went to that island. But fortunately, I was not one of them.
It's just very strange for a lot of people that the list of clients that went to the island has not been made public.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? Probably will be, by the way. Probably.
So if you were able to, you'll be...
Yeah, I'd certainly take a look at it. Now, Kennedy's interesting because it's so many years ago. They do that for danger, too.
It's so many years ago, So, we wouldn't want to mess with anyone's lives currently alive who had a really good relationship with Epstein.
Because, endangers certain people, et cetera, et cetera. So Kennedy is very different from the Epstein thing. But, yeah, I'd be inclined to do the Epstein. I'd have no problem with it.
That's great to hear.
Oh, wait. All kidding aside about the, whatever, how he looks. And he does look extra disheveled. You can see sort of just, it's fine. The makeup's not always put on correctly, but that's all right. But more so, look at how he just eyes go completely shut here.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to do the Epstein. I'd have no problem with it.
That's great to hear.
He's asleep. So much for Sleepy Joe. We are in the home stretch to 1 million subscribers. If you want to support in the effort to get us there, you can do so by clicking the subscribe button if you haven't already to continue getting the word out. Thank you so much. Back to the video. Now, on the substance, what Lex Fridman is referring to is this moment from a Fox News interview.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
All right.
I guess I would. I think that less so because, you don't know. You don't want to affect people's lives if it's phony stuff in there because there's a lot of phony stuff with that whole world. But I think I would, or at least
Do you think that would restore trust? Help restore trust?
Yeah, I don't know about Epstein so much as I do the other.
And then whoever made this edited clip there. But yeah, it's very strange. And you might remember that moment came right after he said, absolutely, I declassified JFK. Absolutely, 9/11. Epstein, I don't know about Epstein because there's a lot of phony stuff in there. Oh, how do you know? Well, I mean, just in the whole world. Like there's a lot of phony stuff. And if you just release a bunch of information about all the people that he had a relationship with, people could have the wrong idea about certain people who didn't do anything wrong, who were on his flight logs 7 times. So now we get to, as we enter into this next question, what's less fun and silly. Not that that's fun, but the first chunk maybe. But it connects to that, which is that, as you noticed there, Epstein didn't cite the 7 flight logs appearances of Trump with Epstein. He didn't ask a follow-up question like that. And this is what, to me, makes this interview a disaster of an interview, which is to say that Trump, okay, he's going to go on MAGA networks constantly. He's going to go on Fox News and Newsmax and OEN, and they're going to say, oh, Mr. President, I have a tough question for you. How do you do it? Every day you get up and you put your pants on, and that inspires me. And And while that's shameful, we expect it. Whenever you sit down with someone, or whenever we hear that Trump's going to sit down with someone who's not necessarily obligated by the type of audience they have to do a softball with them, like Lex Fridman, there's an opportunity here for a more meaningful discussion. It's so sad to me when still Trump's allowed to just go through his normal talking points that everyone knows he's going to go through, with no pushback, with no fact checks, with nothing new being presented. And to be clear, before showing you an example of this, if Kamala Harris sat down with Lex Fridman, he should also, if she started rattling off a bunch of verifiably false statements, he should also be prepared to fact check those. But throughout this whole interview, Trump was able to do his normal thing as if he were on Fox News. And I do, that Lex Fridman's whole style is that, right? Just sort of, and I don't say that in an insulting way, because with a lot of people, it yields really interesting conversations. You give them the mic, you prompt long form answers and dive down any road they want to. And so that might be Freeman's defense. He's not here to debate or to challenge, but instead to just evoke interesting discussions. But when you sit down with the person that every media outlet wants the chance to sit down with, and who wants to be the most powerful person in the world, and who is on the record being one of the most dishonest figures in American politics, verifiably false statements, 10,000 or tens of thousands on the record throughout his presidency, and he's really predictable on what lies he's going to tell, you have to, right? Don't you have to? If you're going to do the interview, or you could choose not to, but if you're going to do it, you have to be ready to push back on some of those things, so that you're not just giving your platform to someone, giving your credibility to someone who's using that for really malicious purposes. But here's the 2020 election question.
Tough topic, but important. You said lost by a whisker. I'm an independent. I have a lot of friends who are independent, many of whom like your policies, like the fact that you're a deal maker, like the fact that you can end wars, but they are troubled by what happened in the 2020 election and statements about widespread fraud and this kind of stuff, fake elector scheme. What can you say to those independent voters to help them decide who to vote for?
Right. I think the fraud was on the other side. I think the election was a fraud. And many people felt it was that, and they wanted answers. And when you can't challenge an election, you have to be able to challenge it. Otherwise, it's going to get worse, not better. And there are lots of ways to solve this problem.
And then he goes on to say a bunch of the things we've heard a bunch of times. I'll skip forward to when Lex Fridman, after a big classic Trump ramble about all these different things we've heard a gazillion times, and they're coming from jails and they're coming from insane asylums, and that's why it was justified for me to try to steal an election. Who knows? Then the follow-up question is this.
Into the United States of America, we can't let that happen.
So a lot of people believe that there was some shady stuff that went on with the election, whether it's media bias or big tech, but still the claim of widespread fraud is the thing that bothers people.
Well, I don't focus on the past, I focus on the future. I mean, I talk about how bad the economy is, how bad inflation is, how bad things like, which is important, Afghanistan was, in my opinion, the most embarrassing thing.
And then on to more talking points we've spent hours addressing on the show, so I'll stop that there. But do you see, that's the extent of the follow-ups. You know Trump's going to say the fraud was on their side. He's not going to go, oh, you're right. The reason people are bothered that I say false claims about the election and try to block peace, transfer, power based on those election lies is because that's a massive threat to our democracy, and I should stop doing that, and I'm done doing it. Thank you, Lex. Next question. Trump's not going to say that. He's going to say, oh, the reason I said that, the reason I tried to do the fake elector scheme, something that's wildly illegal, is because I believe the fraud claims, and there was fraud. And for the follow-up to go, yeah, I mean, a lot of people are bothered by the fishy stuff that I can't really substantiate, but why are you really saying that? And then Trump gets to go on and nothing else. You could have presented quickly, just at least so you could say that you did it. You could present one example of Trump's own attorney general saying there's no merit, or people that Trump hired to investigate the claims like Kim Block saying there's no merit to them, or every single investigation, every single court case, every single audit, every single recount. You could cite any of those examples to see how Trump reacts, because that rarely is something he has to contend with. And whenever he does have slightly critical questions, he'll either storm out of the interview or do the NABJ thing that turned out to be a complete and total political disaster. And I just want to keep saying, because I know it's more difficult to be the one doing the interview than criticizing it from the sidelines. I get that different people have different styles. But when you choose to interview someone like Trump or Kamala Harris, you bring onto yourself, I think, not legally or in any sense like that, but just you bring onto yourself some obligations. And one of them is not to allow someone to exploit your platform for extremely dishonest, malicious purposes. That's a belief of mine, at least. And especially, I know some of these interviews, they throw out a claim and you couldn't possibly know if it's true or not, so you just gotta let it hang out there. But with Trump, he has about 10 phrases he goes back to over and over again. Slight alterations of them. And so you know what he's gonna say. You know, if you bring up Kamala Harris, pretty quickly he's gonna start saying something about the border and how they're coming from jails and assailant asylums. And no matter how much substance you try to bring up in that, or if you try to bring up, the border security bill that you oppose, he's going to just loop and loop and loop and loop and loop. So can't you be prepared, or with the election, to just present some facts? Because otherwise, what's the interview for? No new information or new experiences, new observations of Trump are being gained, other than he looks really weird in the eyes today. Because it's exactly what we could hear in any Fox interview. And that's really, really sad. It really is. Now, a part of why I'm so upset by this is because a lot of questions were like this one.
You're getting smaller and smaller.
They're getting smaller.
Right?
I mean, people do respect you more when you have a big camera for some reason.
No, it's cool. And about 20 guys that you pay a fortune to, right?
All right. Okay. You said that you love winning. And you have won a lot in life. In real estate, in business, in TV, in politics. So let me start with mindset, a psychology question. What drives you more, the love of winning or the hate of losing?
Maybe equally, maybe both. I don't like losing, and I do like winning. I've never thought of it as to which is more of a driving force.
You've been close with a lot of the greats in sport. You think about Tiger Woods, Muhammad Ali.
Okay, and it goes on to that. I hope I'm not cutting these off too short for y'all. They start getting a little... I don't care if Trump focuses more on winning or not losing. He lost in 2020 and he thinks, or he lies that he won. That's the biggest concern I have with those terms relating to Trump. And Lex Fridman in this, the whole thing is like an hour and something, but Trump leaves because it turns into a Lex solo AMA at like 47 minutes. So you got 47 minutes with someone who experts on authoritarianism are warning could do serious damage to our democratic institutions, which could do serious damage to the world. At one point, the Economist, the publication, marked him as one of the most dangerous figures for the world coming up in the year that was ahead when they published it, given his lack of respect for democracy and what that could do in power to global stability, his lack of respect for international institutions like NATO. And to use a part of your 47-minute interview with him to pick his brain on that type of stuff, to me, it just feels like a failed opportunity for sure. He was asked about Joe Rogan and how Trump lashed out at Joe Rogan when Joe Rogan said positive things about RFK Jr. before RFK Jr. endorsed Trump.
Negotiation situation.
No, it's not. It's not really a negotiation. And he's sort of...
Oh, looks like I got that one a little bit ahead. Let's go back.
Let me ask you about my good friend Joe Rogan. So you had a bit of tension with him. So when he said nice things about RFK Jr., I think you've said some not so nice things about Joe, and I think that was a bit unfair. And as a fan of Joe, I would love to see you do his podcast, because he is legit the greatest conversationalist in the world. So what's the story behind the tension?
I don't think there was any tension, and I've always liked him, but I don't know him. I mean, I only see him when I walk into the arena with Dana, and I shake his hand. I see him there, and I think he's good at what he does, but I don't know about doing his podcast. I mean, I guess I'd do it, but I haven't been asked, and I'm not asking them, you know. I'm not asking anybody.
It sounds like a challenging negotiation situation.
No, it's not. It's not really a negotiation. And he's sort of a liberal guy, I guess, you know, from what I understand. But he likes Kennedy. This was before I found this out, before Kennedy came in with us. He's going to be great. Bobby's going to be great. But I like that he likes Kennedy. I do too. You know, he's a different kind of a guy, but he's got some great things going. And I think he's going to be beyond politics. I think he could be.
All right, so yeah, it just, Trump lashes out at someone, and then now that the person that the other person praised who made Trump mad, now that that person is actually for Trump, then that means that the person who praised him is also back in Trump's good graces, because everything is about loyalty to Trump. Nothing is about actual principles. So aggravating. Could you not point that out? And I just want to keep repeating, yes, I would have a more conflict-ridden interview with Trump if I were sitting down with him compared to Kamala Harris, because it happens. We have less aligned values than I do with Kamala Harris. But even with Kamala Harris, I'd have to bring up tough questions. You saw in the Dana Bash interview, MAGA likes to pretend that the CNN interview was a softball, okay? Even though 90% of the interview was just Dana Bash going, here's something Republicans are saying about you, go. Here's something Republicans are saying about you. Just saying Republican text, which is fine. That's sort of an interesting way to conduct an interview. You don't get to talk with your opposition that much. I'll play devil's advocate and throw some of the questions they'd ask at you. It's a little bit annoying because you can't imagine that being done as much with Republicans, but it's still perfectly fine journalism. But that's a softball to them. Whenever she asks 4 questions about the change in policy on fracking, banning or not banning, obviously Kamala Harris saying she's not banning fracking. Boom, 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 boom. And we can't ask one follow-up question on some of these things?
They'll call me something that's terrible, and then I'll hit them back. And they'll say, isn't it terrible what Trump said? I said, well, wait a minute, they just called me. So I believe you have to fight fire with fire. I believe they're very evil people. These are evil people. You know, we have an enemy from the outside, and we have an enemy from within. And in my opinion, the enemy from within are radical left lunatics. And I think you have to fight back.
Whenever there's a lot of fighting fire with fire, it's too easy to forget that there's a middle of America that is that's moderate and kind of sees the good in both sides and just likes one side more than the other in terms of policies. Like I said, there's a lot of people that like your policies, that like your skill in being able to negotiate and end wars, and they don't see the impending destruction of America.
You know, we had no wars when I was president. That's a big...
It's not true. It's not true. The United States was directly involved in more foreign conflicts than we currently are, militarily. Now, what they're talking about is other things that will give aid related to and other very serious conflicts. In the case of, he'll say, I would have prevented Russia from invading Ukraine. And there's whole other discussions about that. But the omitting of real things, like, as an example, they constantly attack Biden over U.S. soldiers who died on his watch. And I do think we should be very, very invested in the deaths of people serving our country. And sometimes that means criticizing the commander-in-chief. But more U.S. service members died in combat under Trump, but then they say it's Biden's fault, but not Trump's fault. It's mind-boggling. And to me, it cheapens these issues down to simple partisan political attacks instead of thoughtful human conversations about them. And then I had more examples, but they're just more examples of sort of just, hey, how does power impact you? Or those sorts of softball questions that to me is a waste of time whenever you have someone who is so consequential, who could be so impactful, and who is rarely challenged properly. But I'll leave it there. I know the segment has taken quite some time. Let me know what you thought of it in the comments. Do you agree? Do you think, no, this is an interesting way to conduct an interview? Or should have Trump been challenged more? You can donate to Kamala Harris' campaign by clicking the link in the description because, yes, we do believe she's the better option. And as unfortunate as it is, money plays a huge role in these elections. So you can contribute to that there. And then a little survey in the description. You want to check that out as well. We're getting some feedback on something.